The Yankees at one point were 27 plus games above 500 amidst their chase for 28 that has since shriveled to just 17 games above 500 at the time of this recording. Hello and welcome into Bomber Boys. I'm Dylan Price, joined alongside, as always, my compadre as we grieve the New York Yankees losses today, Justin Chevalella. And well, there's a lot to talk about because last week's episode we kind of talked about the breaks. They were a little loose, things were rusty, but I'll put a little WD-40 on it and everything will be okay. The breaks have seemingly started to completely fall off. The Yankees are in a downhill spiral that we have not seen in quite some time. The pitching staff is struggling. The bats, outside of everyone named not Ben Rice and maybe Trent Grisham, have really, really struggled. We'll break it all down for you. But before we dive into the sad part of today's episode, Justin, how are you?
Doing well, a little tired this morning, but other than that, still living life up here in Maine and had another off day yesterday, made the most of it, and yeah, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm in the same boat as you. We were supposed to record at 11 a.m. That quickly got pushed back to 11:15, and now we're starting recording at 11:30. So shows that maybe we should stick in the afternoon time slots. But I think it's fitting that we talk in the morning today because we can kind of tie a bow on the Tampa Bay Rays series before we get into a series in Camden Yards this weekend for the Yankees that is must win. But it feels like we've been saying that about the last few series to get these wins for Mojo. But to tie a bow quick on the Tampa Bay Rays series, which I mean, it's not going to be a quick bow tie, it's going to be the extent of the episode. The Yankees have not gotten any production out of their starting rotation since at one point the rotation was maybe the hottest in all of baseball. The bullpen has tried to stay afloat and for the most part done a pretty solid job. The biggest issue therein lies with a rough stretch since Judge's hitting coach called him out and he seemed to be at that point the only guy who could drive home runs. So with that said, outside of Ben Rice, the offense has been lifeless. So obviously, there's a lot of lanes we can go to take this because there's a lot that has gone wrong in the last few weeks with the Yankees. So I'll kind of tee it up to you. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think we got to talk about the lack of clutch hits with this team. You look at the last four games in the starting rotation, really the rotation in general. I guess you could also go back to the Boston series over the weekend. They've started to find their groove again. It's not those same high run scoring games. The most they've allowed is 5 runs. They've done it 3 times, not great, but just in general, the pitching staff has seemingly found their a little bit of a groove again. And not the best because they're falling behind early in games, but they're seemingly finding a little bit more success, which is going to be big going into the All-Star break coming up and obviously to this Orioles series. But the lack of hitting is now where this team's biggest problem was. Last week we come on and we're saying you can't blame the hitters because of how bad the pitching staff has been. Well, now the pitching staff has gotten better and they're keeping you in games. Now the offense has, we talked about them, they were disappearing. Now they've completely disappeared. And that's a problem when you have Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Anthony Volpe, Ben Rice, those guys in your lineup. And that's crazy that I'm putting Ben Rice in the top four right now of the Yankees, which is not what we would have expected when the season first began. But on the off day yesterday, finally got the chance to watch an entire Yankee game and not just, a couple innings or just watch highlights on Twitter. I got to watch the whole game and sit down. And of course, ninth inning comes around. You've got the exact part of your offense that you need up trying to come back from 2 runs down. Oswaldo walks and gets on base. Verdugo in the leadoff spot last night, questionably, but you move Ben Rice down in the 4 spot. Someone's got to move up, and they must have listened to the podcast, the Yankees, because I said that Anthony Volpe's got to get out of the leadoff spot. He got out of the leadoff spot. I'm just saying, maybe they're listening. Maybe we should start saying more about who the Yankees need to get at the deadline and whatnot. Besides the point right now, Verdugo, he gets out. Soto gets on base. Then, Judge comes up with the game on the line. A chance to take the lead on one swing doesn't work out. Ben Rice with the only clutch hit yesterday, and then Glaber finishing off the game with, I got to say, the Rays just play a better game of baseball when they play us. That catch, I don't know if you saw it, but that catch to end the game yesterday, it's like that falls against probably 28 other teams in the MLB. But because they were playing against the Yankees, of course it's caught. At the end of the day, that's not, you know, even really the problem here. The Yankees don't have clutch hits anymore. You look early on in the season, Houston series, when Oswaldo Cabrera was going off on some random explosion of offense and Juan Soto's big hits were coming in the key moments of games. Now it feels like you're getting big hits at times. Soto, I believe, homered again yesterday and had a double. You had those hits thrown in there, but you don't have them when you need them. And that's a big problem. And then you've got Aaron Judge. It's the same type of deal. There's a meme that goes around every once in a while on Twitter. It's like Aaron Judge, and I don't remember how it goes. I'm not really the best when it comes to memes, but it's like Aaron Judge only, you know, no clutch hits, only stat padding home runs, which I don't fully believe at any, point. But it starts to raise a question if the Yankees do have anyone clutch on the team, because yesterday was a winnable game. Pete Fairbanks was struggling out there trying to close that game down for the Yankees. Glaber goes and chases a pitch outside the zone in a crucial moment. Judge's at bat didn't look too great. And it's just like, when do you get that fire and that clutch hit, knack back? Because they had it in the beginning of the year. And now it just seems like every big moment, it's a failure instead of anything coming through.
And it's a far cry from the team that we saw earlier on because there was clutch hits from everybody in the order. There was guys who we could have never expected to be producing as early and as frequently as they were, and guys like Oswaldo Cabrera who had a heck of a first few months. And then even guys, I mean, we'll go to Jose Trevino, who at one point was one of the guys we were talking about when we rejoined the Bomber Boys show just a few weeks ago as sneakily like one of the most productive guys since we left things off at school. Obviously, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Alex Verdugo has kind of started to fall off a cliff. But I want to go back to where you kind of were Nostradamus. I'll give you a little tip of the cap where we both tweeted it out this weekend. You were on the money predicting that Ben Rice would be a good leadoff hitter because he truly was that. He was incredibly productive. A 3 home run game against the Red Sox as a Massachusetts kid growing up. There was that picture that started circulating of him in Yankees gear and his siblings not. And I mean, kudos to him for beating the Red Sox and really doing it on his own to some extent. But I kind of thought that might be the match, maybe the thing that would kind of light the Yankees going into Sunday. And then they just were lifeless yet again. Another embarrassing series against the Red Sox, another embarrassing series loss that now has them at 0-7-1 in their last 8 series. I mean, it's one of the worst stretches of baseball we've seen in quite some time. The time of this recording, it's July 12th. I'm hoping that we both get this turned around and out before Camden Yards hosts the Yankees and Orioles this weekend. But in that time span, the Yankees are 8 at the top of today's show, shriveled their games above 500 from 27 plus to 17. The offense has really struggled, but the pitching staff is struggling on the same front. They're letting up first inning runs at a clip that has been really matched by few and far between. It was punctuated by Carlos Rodon's performance the other night, which led me to start thinking about this. And then want to shout out, she is huge with Talking Yanks, Katie Sharp from Sharp Stats. Since June 13th, the Yankees opponents have scored first in 17 games. The only team with more such games in that span are the Angels, which anytime you're in the conversation with the Angels is not a great time. They're 2-14 in that time span. I mean, that is not great at all. 2-14 when opponents have scored first. And they have done so in a big way. I mean, even the other night, that was a winnable game, even after Carlos Rodon allowed those runs to cross the plate. And poor Ashley Rodon immediately getting away from Twitter and saying, listen, I'm just here to defend my husband. I'm just here to defend the team. Leave me alone. Like, I'm not getting caught in the crossfire. But it was just another example of this starting rotation that was once one of the best in baseball has now slowly started to kind of, not even in a like kind of way where they just boom fell off a cliff, but it's like slowly crawling over the cliff, and now they're like trickling off the cliff, and now you don't know what to do. And the conversation you and I had a couple weeks ago of, definitely they'll look to add in the bullpen and they'll look to probably add in the lineup at the deadline, and they certainly should. But the one spot we said, yeah, they probably won't look to make a big addition was the starting rotation because you've got six guys for five spots once Clark Schmidt's healthy. Right now, I don't think it's any guarantee that they don't add to the starting rotation. Obviously, we'll talk more moves. We'll talk the All Star break in a little bit. But as bad as the bats were, to get back to your point about clutch hitting, as bad as the bats were, the pitching has been nearly just as putrid. And part of the reason the bats, I think, have lacked the clutch hits or lacked any semblance of momentum is because they're already so far behind in games. To bring back to that 2-14 note in that 17 game spot time span, which that math doesn't math. So somewhere Katie Sharp missed a game, 2-14 in 17 games. 16 games, but I digress. Regardless, it's still a bad record. So kind of going back to the pitching staff, what do you believe has kind of gone wrong? Because it has really been a steep decline, really, since we restarted the show up.
It almost just feels like fatigue. It almost feels like that break is needed. And I'm not a pitching coach. I don't know the most about pitching. I used to throw a two seam right down the middle every time I'd step on the mound. And against, kids 2 or 3 years younger than me, the two seamer worked just right down Broadway at 60 miles per hour. But it just
You
feels
were
like,
topping 60?
yeah, actually, I did the speed pitch thing that we have here at Goodall Park. I did hit 68 this year so far. That's a high. I've got to keep stretching it out. The problem is I do it and then my arm hurts for 2 days. So it's about, do I actually want to keep doing it or not? Still going to try to hit 70 before I leave here in a couple of weeks. But back to the point, it feels like fatigue has caught up. We look at this rotation. Luis Heel, he's a guy that's coming off of Tommy John surgery, a guy that's technically still a rookie, hasn't pitched this much in a couple of years. You look at Carlos Rodon the last couple of years, especially last year, he didn't pitch a full year because he was injured. And obviously there was the problems he had when he came back, but it just feels like, again, you got a healthy Rodon, but now the healthy Rodon hasn't had a couple days off here and there because of, the last couple of years when he's had those IL stints. He's gone the whole year so far, which is great, but it feels like it's almost catching up to him. It almost feels like you need to skip a start for everyone, not just for Carlos Rodon. You just keep going. Nestor Cortez, probably been the most consistent guy. What's the one thing that doesn't seem to be affecting him? Fatigue for some reason, which is crazy because last year, this time when his ERA was ballooned up compared to where it was the year before, I was sitting here going, it's fatigue because this is a guy that's never pitched this many innings. And then it's the fact that the pitch clock made him speed up for a guy that's not a fast thrower in terms of his delivery, likes to mix things up, dance around, and whatnot. Sure enough, he's adjusted well to all that. And this year, he's bounced back better. Marcus Stroman, he's been pretty consistent as well, I'd say, for the Yankees. A guy that you and I talked about when we were still at school. Marcus Stroman is going to give you 25 plus starts per year. He's going to give you an ERA in the threes. We had already established that, and he's doing exactly that for the New York Yankees. Can't be disappointed there. And now Garrett Cole, it's not fatigue with Cole. It's a lack of trust, I think, in his stuff. And I think he's concerned about his arm. And I think he's concerned that if he continues to throw the way he used to throw, he's going to have to get the surgery. And now it questions, did the Yankees just mess up and Garrett Cole for down the road? Is Garrett Cole inevitably going to end up with Tommy John this offseason and have to miss all of next year? When you could have gotten ahead of it, he missed half the year anyway. I know it wasn't necessary, it wasn't needed, was the fact that came out, but you don't know exactly what's going on in that elbow. And anytime the elbow's involved and anytime it's getting weakened, maybe just start opting for the surgery beforehand, just so you can get ahead of it and you can have that health because you miss half a season. You haven't come back sharp at all because you don't trust your stuff. And who knows what's going to happen. If his elbow does end up giving out, then the Yankees lose basically 2 full years of prime Garrett Cole because of one injury. And it's like, this is a point with this rotation that you've got to question, what do you actually have? Clark Schmidt, when's he coming back? He'd be a big add. This way you can either have a sixth starter, give everyone an extra day rest, which I don't think you can do with the bullpen right now, but You bring back Clark Schmidt, you get a little cushion. You can, mess around and skip starts here and there for people to allow them to get some extra rest. And I think that's important right now. I think the All-Star game coming up and 4-day break, and the Yankees don't have a starting pitcher in the All-Star game, at least as of the moment, unless somebody needs to be replaced. And right now, I don't think any Yankee is the top guy to replace any injury that occurs. The only Yankee pitcher in is Clay Holmes. Don't know how, but he is. And at this point, those 4 days, if you're a Yankee pitcher, I don't know if you're going off to, a nice little tropical island or whatnot, if you're just going out to the Hamptons, whatever the case is, you've got to chill. You don't throw a baseball. Give your arm a break, all of them, and just let yourself rest and get ready because you're over halfway with the season. The All-Star game is the unofficial halfway point or past the halfway point. Now we need you for the next 60, 70 games to be the sharpest you can be. And I think right now the problem is that the arms are just tired. It's a bunch of guys that probably didn't expect this year. Talked about it. Garrett Cole missing it. Clark Schmidt getting injured. This was a rotation. We didn't know coming into the year if they could even be good in general. They started out overperforming, and now that they're underperforming, it's a panic button situation for the Yankees, especially since they were all hot at the beginning and now they're all cold at once. It's not like Keel was hot at the beginning and Rodon was struggling. Now, flip it. It's everyone was, pitching well and now everyone's pitching poorly, and it's a recipe for disaster.
You hit the nail on the head there. It's not like the Yankees have chosen to see the offense steep decline and the pitching staff steep decline in separate times. It's the same time. And then to go into the starting rotation, you've got five guys, and somehow all five of them suddenly tank at the same time. Like the only reasonable expectation for a solution is fatigue. Like that's got to be what the thing is that it has to be plaguing everybody at this point in the season. And it's obviously concerning because we're not even in the dog days of summer yet. And you don't want to start having to skip starts with guys that consistently, but it might have to become a serious thing. And it goes back to our conversation at the top of the show about, maybe it was never going to be a six-man rotation. Maybe now that's more of a consideration. It was never going to be maybe the Yankees are looking to add a starter at the deadline because they've got six guys for five spots, but without fatigued, those guys are. Maybe that's more of a consideration. So for Nestor, for Stroman, for Heel, I will definitely agree with you. I think it's wear and tear. I think we're just at that point in the season where they've also thrown a lot more innings than I think they expected to throw, especially in Nestor and Rodon's case. You kind of hit the nail on the head as well with these are guys who have missed time in the past few years. So they're also being worked back up as much as we talk about Heel and Cole with coming back from injury. That's another example of it. Stroman still continued to probably be the most consistent and the most consistent winning starting pitcher. A 4-8 record for Nestor is surprising, but when you really look at it, they do seem to play their worst offensively every time Nestor
It's like the
is
DeGrom.
on
It's
the bump.
like the DeGrom from a
Yeah.
couple of years ago where he'd pitch a shutout or one run and still somehow lose.
Going back to some of the other guys, though, fatigue wise, Carlos Rodon has lost his five last starts. His ERA is now at 4.63. In Luis Gil's case, Gil has seen his all-star candidacy tank because Gil has really struggled to put forth pretty strong outings. In his last five starts, he's lost four of those five.
And I
In
think
three, he
if you
hasn't
don't
gone
mind me,
past the fourth inning.
yeah, I think his last start was really good though, and a positive sign for the Yankees, the one against Boston over the weekend. I
Mhm.
think he got bit, he got a loss in that because he was up at 95, 96 pitches was his final total, so probably 90 when he let up that home run. And personally, he was laboring through that, and I was watching that game, and I was like, you should probably have taken Luis Gil out. Now, of course, hindsight's 2020. Devers probably homers against any pitcher that we throw out there because that just seems to be the way this team rolls against Rafael Devers. But I think that last start was a positive step forward for Luis Gil. They need him again this weekend against Baltimore. But you're right. He's lost multiple of his last starts, and he hasn't been going long in there. And that's just another sign of fatigue.
And then one more point on that, because obviously Heel is that's an encouraging sign. But even as you mentioned, leaving him on, and obviously, like you said, hindsight is 2020. You pull him, and maybe you put somebody else in there like Tonkin, and hope that they don't let up a home run to Devers. But Devers seems to just be a Yankees killer to a T. But even we'll talk Stroman for a second here. Stroman has now seen his last three starts not exactly hit his marks. He tossed 4 1/3 in the win the other night, but even then, he was at 84 pitches in the fifth frame. So his pitch count ended up being his kind of Achilles there. 5 innings pitched in the loss to Cincinnati, allowed 5 runs, tossed 4 1/3 in the 16-5 victory over Toronto, allowed 3 in 4 1/3. His pitch count is really high going into the fifth inning, pretty much in every start he's been into, even going back to the loss at Boston on the 16th of June, 102 pitches through 5 frames. So he's just kind of unfortunately letting up base runners and seeing guys work counts against him. But otherwise, Stroman has been consistent, just not going as deep into starts as you would like. But there's things to nitpick because in that sense, we're giving kind of Stroman a hall pass when, I mean, this whole rotation has just not been good. And to kind of cap it all off, to rebuttal your point on Garrett Cole, not really necessarily rebuttal it, really agree with it. I mean, this is not the Garrett Cole of old. This is not the Cy Young Garrett Cole. It doesn't even seem like, and maybe it is the elbow thing, but it doesn't even seem like he has the same confidence in himself and his stuff right now. It's disheartening. It's obviously not good in the long run if he does go down because the Yankees can't afford to lose him. Obviously, they were performing well without him in those first few games, but it was just biding time until Cole got back. He is the ace of the team for a reason. He does make $324 million over the length of his contract for a reason. But he has only pitched 5 innings in one of his 4 starts. He let up 6 runs in the loss to the Mets in the Subway Series. Not necessarily a terrible outing against Boston, 4 innings in 4 1/3 pitched, 4 runs. But I mean, that's a run per inning. And if you take the last out of that outing, but I mean, this has not been the Garrett Cole of old by any stretch of the word. And we thought maybe his mojo was coming back after a solid enough outing against Toronto, but nobody in the rotation can seem to find momentum. And then at that point, it doesn't matter what the bullpen does. A bullpen that has been lights out and has been really solid outside of Cardiac Clay and everything he brings to the table with, for every save you do get from Clay, there's 5 blown saves now on the season. Luke Weaver should be in the All-Star game. I don't believe Clay Holmes should be, but I mean, I do maybe think from the outside looking in, maybe we do give Clay a harder time than the rest of the league does. He does have 20 saves. He does have a below 3 ERA, and as a closer, that's pretty solid. But Luke Weaver, I do believe, should be in the All-Star game. I think he was a complete snub. Outside of that, I mean, Michael Tonkin now has staying power with this team. He's now appeared in 26 games with a 1.53 ERA. Tommy Kahnle has been solid enough and started to find a real rhythm to some extent. Tim Hill was a nice addition. I mean, a 2.38 ERA. Jake Cousins, he's going to have a little bit of staying power. He's been pretty good. And then Josh Maciejewski, maybe Josh Maciejewski might be a long-term reliever in this pen. So it's guys who were definitely not expected to be in the pen at the start of the year that are now finding roles within it. But it doesn't matter how well they do because the starting rotation is getting them to a point where after the first inning, they're being tagged with a few runs. And by the time they come out, they're already in a spot where the bullpen is just biding time until the game gets over because the offense can't seem to answer back either.
And that's the difference this year is the last couple of years, and I know the Yankees fell off in after Aaron Judge's injury last year in LA, but the fact of the matter was when you brought these guys up last year and they overperformed, some guys that had key moments, and I know, Jake Bauers we make fun of, but he had some big hits thrown in there. And like the guys that had some success that shouldn't really have had success the last, I don't know, it feels like 4 or 5 years, the Yankees are pulling guys from everywhere and somehow they can get them to perform well. I know we talk about the Matt Blake pitching factory all the time. The years past, it's these guys are coming up for injuries or, they're short on the roster because they just traded someone away. Whatever the case is, they were coming up as stopgap options where they're there for a little while and then after that they're supposed to be gone and then they overperformed and worked themselves onto the roster. This year, a lot of the guys that you just named are there because the Yankees didn't have a good settled roster come opening day. And what it led to is a complete back and forth changing matter of who's on the roster and who's not. Clayton Beeter, who now might miss the rest of the season, he was on the opening day roster, pitched once against Houston, sent back down. Don't even still know what was going on with that one. He got a taste of the majors and is back down, a cup of coffee. But it just feels like the Yankees right now are relying too heavily on these guys. They're performing well and doing well. The issue is they're relying on them for the wins. Last year and the years prior, they would have these guys that ended up helping them win, but they didn't need to rely on them to get these wins. And now this year, you look at all those guys you just named, and it's like, should they even be on a major league roster? Based on the fact that we're claiming them off of waivers or signing them from free agency, probably not. But they're on the major league roster and they're performing well, and caps off to them and caps off to Matt Blake for what he's been able to do with them. It's just a matter of those are the guys that are supposed to come in and help in areas that you're weak in. And maybe in those rare blowout games over the last couple of years, they would get their good outings in there, whether the Yankees be winning or losing by a lot. Those were the needs out of the bullpen. You didn't really have some guy to just throw. Well, now you've got these guys that need high leverage innings based off how you've pitched them. And it's like, should we really be relying on, Michael Tonkin and Tim Hill to be getting wins for the Yankees? Probably not. We should be relying on Carlos Rodon, Garrett Cole, that entire starting five we just talked about. And he can't. And it's just like, at what point is there a point that these guys regress back to their old ways? And then that'll mean everything's off the table for the Yankees because those are the guys carrying the Yankees right now, which is crazy to say. If those guys start falling back to their old ways that got them DFA'd or put on waivers in the first place, oh, the Yankees are going to have much more problems than they already do. And it's just weird to see that the last couple of years, it was like that final roster spot or two. The Yankees needed to call up the guys and kind of had that back and forth shuffle. Now they didn't have their roster ready to go on opening day. They didn't have enough guys in the bullpen or whatnot. And it just felt that these guys would be shuffling all year. They've worked themselves into roles. But at the end of the day, you're supposed to be relying on the guys with the big money to get you the wins, the Aaron Judge, the Juan Sotos, those guys, the Garrett Coles, the Carlos Rodons, and you're relying on these other guys right now. And it's funny to me how it's kind of completely changed from which of these guys is going to become a miracle out of the bullpen and have a low ERA to it's no longer about needing a miracle. This is what these guys have proven this year, but it's like, why? Why are these the guys that have become the high leverage guys for the New York Yankees? And why are these the guys that are performing well while the other ones that shouldn't be performing bad are performing bad? And I just find that it's hard to sustain success like that. That's the simplest way to put it. I said early in the year when we were still back at school, the Yankees team feels like a team held together by Elmer's glue. And clearly, that Elmer's glue is falling apart. Somehow, though, the guys that I was kind of referring to in the bullpen with the Elmer's glue, they're the guys that have been the strongest for the New York Yankees. And the guys that should be the structural support, the big support beams, they're the ones falling off. And it's just a complete change of one, how you want it to be if you're the Yankees, because it's easier to, get rid of a Tonkin or a Hill if they were performing bad than it is to a Garrett Cole or a Rodon or somebody like that. And it just feels that this team, it's got the roles reversed right now. And either you need those top guys to start performing alongside the guys that you weren't expecting to perform, or you need them to switch. And obviously, the best for the Yankees would be everyone performs well. It's not a recipe for success at a moment. And it's the reason, one of the big reasons that the Yankees have been struggling lately.
I'll equate it to this example that kind of came to mind for me here. When you would go to the store as a kid, the movies that were on DVD, they'd always have the ones that were on the rack and the ones that were over by the electronics. They got the special treatment, the new releases, the Oscar winning movies, the movies that you expect to be pretty good. To me, I think of, I'm going back to the last couple of years, it was Everywhere, Everything, All at Once, some kind of movie that came out. It was a sci-fi thing. Listen, you and I aren't huge movie guys, but we have a lot of people in our lives who are movie fans. Another big one, La La Land. I just watched it for the first time. It was an Oscar-winning movie a few months ago, but it delivered. These movies delivered because they were expected to. Some of them are duds, some of them aren't great, but for the most part, they deliver. Twister, I think, is coming out soon. The new sequel, apparently, it's getting critically acclaimed reviews. You expect those kind of movies to deliver all-star casting, high production, a lot of money invested in them. Kind of like your starters. You expect them to deliver. You should hope that they are the ones that carry, the movie season. You don't expect the 299 movies that are just kind of thrown into that big bin, and it's the
Oh,
movies with the $0 production and the guys who were just learning how to use a camera for the first time and a shaky camera filming, and I don't even know, the poor CGI, all the bad, everything, that it was just a low budget film. You don't expect those films to carry an Oscar season, an award season. You hope that they get you a few laughs on a Friday night, and do that with a pizza, and that could be a good Friday night. But you don't expect that to be a long term winner, something that you would invest a lot in, because the plot's and the production was never going to be great because it's a low budget film. Right now, Matt Blake was playing in the bargain bin and finding these films and going, okay, this one's solid enough. It'll work on a Friday night. But then it's, oh, well, actually, let's watch it again on Sunday because it's pretty good. Let's watch it again on Tuesday because it grows on you. Hey, maybe we put it up for an Oscar. At the end of the day, that's what the Yankees bullpen is. It's a bunch of bargain bin guys who have found themselves with some staying power. Low budget, low money guys, not a lot of investment in them. They've delivered, but they're not going to be the ones that deliver an award season in the playoffs. You're expecting them to just get you over and get you to that point, like a get you over fastball. The starting rotation, the big budget films, your La La Lands, your Everywhere, Everything, All at Once is, well, they have not delivered at all these last few weeks. In this 8-18 stretch, the high budget films, the guys you expect to be piloting you through Oscar season, have been lifeless. And I mean, you could go and make that example to some extent in the lineup as well, but that just feels like a different beast and a whole different equation. But it's disappointing to see those guys that you wouldn't want to count on for big outings now kind of carrying the Yankees pitching staff, as you mentioned. And the bargain bin films are the ones that could be helping you into award season, because Michael Tonkin could be your eighth inning pitcher with how well he's performed. And kudos to him, and kudos to Matt Blake, because he has taken a little and made a lot out of it. But on the starting rotation, I don't know if there's even anything Matt Blake can do right now, because it is fatigue. It is going to be pretty conclusive how they go into the All-Star break. It's a much, much needed All-Star break, as you mentioned, where nobody should touch anything reminiscent of a baseball. I don't want anybody going even near a weight bag. Don't even work out. Okay, maybe probably still work out, but I don't know. I want to go as far to say go sit on a beach somewhere and sip on fruity cocktails if you're not in the All-Star game, but do something to get your mind away from baseball, get your arm away from baseball, and take a much needed break, because this rotation is, as you mentioned, clearly fatigued. And in Garrett Cole's case, maybe go see a doctor, maybe figure out how 100% you really are, because right now he doesn't look it. And it does almost feel like there might have been an organizational pressure to rush him back. And now Cole is in a spot where it's kind of boom or bust, because if he is really hurt, if an outing like tonight doesn't go as planned, we go into the All-Star break talking about, is the ace even 80%, 70%? And should they shut down Cole once Schmidt's back, which is really concerning to think about. It's a pretty big time stretch this weekend. Cole will be on the bump tonight. Tomorrow on the mound, it's Heel. So two guys you really need to see have strong outings. And then Sunday, 11:35 a.m. on Roku, we will see Carlos Rodon on the bump again. And
I
that's a
can
guy
tell
who
you,
needs to
I
go
won't
in.
see Carlos Rodon because I ain't getting a Roku and I ain't trying to watch or have 18 streaming services to watch the New York Yankees this season.
We'll talk streaming services in a moment, but that's it. That's it. How we head into the All-Star break, and then from there, as you mentioned, as of now, no starters slated to head to the game. It's only Clay Holmes, Juan Soto, and Aaron Judge representing the Yankees right now. I think if Anthony Volpe and Luis Gil didn't have a bit of a rough June, I think you'd probably be talking about both of
Yeah.
them heading out there as well. But rough stretch knocks them out of it. So you only send three guys, and probably the three guys you can send to the games and just feel okay with right now. Everybody else needs a break, needs some time off. I think we'll go here because we've kind of alluded to the bats. You talked about it at the top, and I don't want to beat a dead horse because there's not a whole lot of good here either. But Ben Rice has been electric. We mentioned that. Austin Wells has been having really good at bats. His batting average is just around 220. I'll say this because I like to be the perpetual optimist of our duo. Trevino and Wells has been a solid platoon this year. It's not going to light the world on fire. Neither of them are in the All Star conversation. And yes, Trevino has dipped down a little bit, but defensively, they've both been solid. Trevino's arm has been a bit of a killer.
Yes.
I'm more so giving Wells the nod for being solid there. But on the other side of things, Trevino's bat has helped pick up Wells while Wells has struggled in his first full season. I think they've just complemented each other well. If you took each of them out of their platoon and said, okay, Austin Wells is pretty much the everyday catcher or Jose Trevino is the everyday catcher, then yeah, I'm probably not feeling great with it. I'm probably not feeling 100% with how they've done and probably not giving them this credit right now. But as a platoon, where Trevino struggled, Wells has picked him up defensively, and then where Wells has kind of struggled to find a rhythm with his bat, Trevino's kind of helped him there. They still are letting too many runners get to second. I mean, singles are turning into doubles way too quickly, but that seems like a nitpicking thing and almost a mute point when the bats, the rotation, the bullpen have kind of been the major key headlines. Bullpen's up, pitching staff and lineups down. Any final thoughts before we get into the All Star break and the streaming service debacle that I know you want to rant about?
I don't really want to rant about it, but I'm just telling you, I won't be watching Sunday's game with Carlos Rodon on the mound. I think you made a good point about the catchers and how they are complementing each other. You look at it and you're like, neither are really providing full, full catching for the Yankees. But at this point in the MLB and what we've seen recently is you either get a catcher that can hit with no defense or a catcher with defense and no hitting. And I think we were a little spoiled with Jose Trevino kind of being able to do both for a couple of years. And now he's kind of regressed back to a little bit less on the defensive end. And I think all things considered, you probably would like to upgrade there, but there's too many other spots to upgrade right now to even look at the catching position. I think you're right about Wells having some better at bats. I know he did have a good stretch thrown in there himself. I just think there's too many spots, and you kind of said it. You know, the lineup in general, outside of Ben Rice, and Aaron Judge and Juan Soto have been doing the same thing all season. That's the end of the story with them. I know Soto's in a bit of a struggle right now, but it feels like you've been kind of getting the same thing from them all season. I think the last point I want to make before we get to the All-Star game, the home run derby, that type of stuff, is what's going on with the Yankees is pretty simple. And I talked to the Sanford Mainers manager, Nick Lopes, a conference coach of the year multiple times. He's led them to the playoffs year after year. And when some things go wrong with Mainers, asking him questions in our little post-game interview, he makes a good point. He goes, baseball's a game that there's going to be a snowball, whether it's a good snowball or a bad snowball effect going on. And he goes, when things are going right, everyone's going to feel the effects of it. The rotation, the bullpen, the bats, and you're going to get hot. And that's, I think, what we saw at the beginning of the year. Little, over, you know, over exceeding expectations for some guys in the rotation. Same thing with the bullpen. The lineup was doing exactly what it was expected to do. And the lineup I think personally, the lineup led to that snowball effect where everyone just started to get better because they felt more comfortable knowing that lineup could pick them up and get going. And I think that's what we saw, especially early in the year. Now we're seeing the opposite effect. Things are slowing down in the rotation. Now things are slowing down at the plate because, heck, you really aren't competitive in any game that you're down big early. It's hard to make comebacks in Major League Baseball. It's just the simple point of, the fact. And it's like, that's the simple thing going on right now is it's this snowball effect. All the Yankees need right now is one thing to get going. And I know we just talked about those bullpen arms that are exceeding expectations, but like we just talked about, they're the bargain bin guys. You need something big to go right early, whether it be Garrett Cole tonight against the Orioles, whether it be Luis Gil on Saturday against the Orioles, whatever the case is, you need to find something to build upon. And then the positive snowball effect comes back. Because if you get a good Garrett Cole tonight, Garrett Cole's one of those guys who's going to energize the rest of the dugout. If Cole goes 6 innings tonight, possibly even 7, I don't know if they'd extend him that far with how he's looked so far. But just saying, if he goes 6 or 7 of 2-run baseball tonight, that's going to just get the lineup to be a bit more motivated. Heck, Garrett Cole kept us in this game. Let's go win this game for him. Let's go have those clutch hits late in the game. Aaron Judge, go deep, something like that. It's that positive snowball. And then you take it from one game and you extrapolate it out to the season or, for a week, a month, whatever the case is. And then that's how you get back going. Baseball is one of those sports where when things go cold, things go cold. But when things go hot, they're going to go hot and they're going to go right. And right now, all it takes is one major performance. And we thought it was the Ben Rice 3 home runs last week. But I also texted you. I went back here while we were talking and looked at what I said. And it just didn't. I said they're going to lose embarrassingly on Sunday Night Baseball. Sure, it wasn't the 13-4 performance I predicted, but it was a pretty embarrassing, you keep it that close to then fall apart late. It also just didn't feel like, sure, 3 home runs from Ben Rice, but the rest of that game didn't seem like anything else was snowballing with him in the positive direction. It was just Ben Rice. You need that one performance, whether it be Cole in the offense tonight or something over the weekend, to finally get yourself going. And at this point, if it has to wait till everyone's rested after the All-Star game, you'll take that positive, snowball right out of the All-Star game and get going. But that's the simple matters. Baseball's a game of momentum. Sports really are. And the Yankees just have none right now, and they're snowballing in the negative direction.
Hey, DJ LeMahieu's above 200. He's at 202 right now.
Okay, but he's not a big enough snowball
I'm
effect right
looking
now.
I'm looking for little snowballs.
All
It's
right.
Listen, an avalanche doesn't always have to start with a big giant snowball causing it. It can be a little snowball. It could be a Trent Grisham all-star performance the other night. He's still firmly below the Mendoza line. Hey, I do think you hit the nail on the head there. I think we could sit here and it has been a bit of a cluster F of an episode, for lack of better words, because we've kind of danced all over it. But there's not a whole lot for Justin and I to sit here and really tell you that you can't see by turning on the game for a few minutes. It's kind of a disaster outside of Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and the bargain bin relievers right now. But
And
you
Ben
hope for
Rice.
little things. And Ben Rice, and Ben Rice. You hope little things start to click, and as you mentioned, you can extrapolate that in the long term. Ben Rice, Austin Wells having really good at bats. Ben Rice raking. Alex Verdugo had a good night the other night. I think Anthony Volpe with a little bit of off time and a little bit of more consistency in that middle part of the order to kind of get his swing back, I think is going to be good. Gleyber Torres, if you extrapolate his last couple games, has not been entirely disastrous, which is a bit of a far cry from where he was at. He's still not Gleyber of old, and in a walk year for him, I think his confidence is all but shot. But I think next week we talk more about what they do at the break, what they do at the deadline, and what you and I would do if we were in Cashman and Boone's situation right now. I did forget one thing I wanted to mention here that I know you and I have talked about for long episodes before, and it's something that if you're a longtime Bomber Boys listener, you know was kind of Justin and I's MO and one of our biggest issues with the organization. Aaron Judge's hitting coach on the 4th of July lit off some fireworks. He went on Twitter and said that the Yankees' offensive player development is, to put it blandly, a disservice to the players. And I think I'm probably tempering that down a little bit than the way he put it. His
Keeping
timeline's
it
a bit of a
PG-13.
disaster. I am keeping it PG-13. But it's not something that you and I haven't talked about before, which is why I kind of buried the lead and put it at the middle part of this episode here, back end of the episode. However long you and I ran about the home run derby, we'll see. But I think it's not surprising for you and I that people are finally catching on to this, because look at the lineup. Outside of Austin Wells, Anthony Volpe, Aaron Judge, and now Ben Rice, this isn't a homegrown lineup. I mean, I throw Oswaldo Cabrera in, but Oswaldo's not an everyday player. But I mean, Juan Soto coming in here to be your second best player, your running mate to Aaron Judge, the Batman to his Batman, or whatever you want to call it, is an outside hire. Alex Verdugo being your third, fourth, depending on the day, most productive player is a guy that most Yankees fans didn't want when he was first added to the team. It actually took you and I kind of me at first, but then you eventually joining along with me here, campaigning and saying, "Hey, listen, it's we had to kind of be a bit of the flag bearers for Alex Verdugo for a little bit there." But it isn't a surprise to me that their offensive player development is now coming under the limelight. It isn't a surprise to me that I'm sure next week we'll break down the fact that once again we're hearing the Aaron Boone quote. It's right in front of us again. Because when all things change in life, things still remain the same. When there is that snowball effect and things go good, there's going to be a snowball effect where things go down. Everything that comes up must come down. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Aaron Boone reverts back to form with it's right in front of us. It's like he's a robot and it's his default mechanism when they start losing more than
It's like
five
he's a
games
puppet for
in
the
it,
front office.
which I'm sure we'll get into next week. But I would actually say isn't necessarily a complete right now. We'll see what he does at the deadline. Fault of Brian Cashman because I think last year the Yankees roster was just not talented. It was a roster that was depleted because of injuries and because of whatever else you want to throw into the fold. But this time around, Yankees talent's there. Clearly, they were at one point the best team in baseball. Folks, we're kind of waving the white flag and panicking a little bit here heading into the All-Star break, but they're only a couple games back of the O's for first place in the AL East. This is not a disaster situation. We're not sounding the alarms. We're just both being realists here and saying that Aaron Boone's made some pretty bad decisions. Aaron Boone is coming to the microscope of late, but both are going to come into the microscope. And the one thing that I'm surprised is finally being analyzed is what you and I have said for so long that there's a reason they have to outsource. There's a reason at the deadline we're talking about Ryan McMahon's and I'll even throw him in here, even though they're not going to trade him. But the Pete Alonso types that we talked about a
The
few weeks ago,
Jazz
because
Chisholm's the big report right now.
the guys who are going to have to come from outside the organization to be solutions. Because, shocker, you would think with one of your guys helping pilot the lineup, who's a homegrown one in Ben Rice, that you would say, hey, what do we got in Scranton? What do we got in Somerset that we could bring up here right now and start playing well? Jorbit Vivas, Agustin Ramirez, couple guys you could rattle right off the dome. Caleb Durbin, before he got hurt, was a guy that I was waving a flag for and saying, hey, maybe we get him up here. Maybe he's a Glaber solution. But whatever you want to call it, whoever you want to handpick out of their minor league system right now, it clearly isn't somebody that Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone have keyed in on. And obviously, we'll analyze organizational faults more at the halfway point next week when we get into the All-Star break. But I'm just not surprised that finally the offensive player development is being called out. I just didn't think it would be from Aaron Judge's personal hitting coach.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're the Yankees, you really want it to be Aaron Judge's personal hitting coach to come out and say stuff like that because it's a bad look when your captain's, personal hitting coach is calling out the rest of the organization. But it's true. You and I have talked about this forever now, probably since we started Bomber Boys now, what, 2 years ago? It's just been that same thing of, hey, where is the talent in the minors? I'm looking right now, and you've got a guy like a former top prospect in a different organization, and Jeter Downs. He's arguably the best and most consistent hitter in AAA, at least when you put power and average and all that together. But it feels like the prospects are not developing in the way they should be. You named a few that were having really good years down there, but just the fact that you can't trust any of them when you bring them up. Like, we've seen this the last couple of years, the Oswaldo Cabrera situation where it's like, you were really bad last year and you were bouncing back and forth. And luckily he came out strong this year and he kind of cemented himself as a platoon player on the roster. But the Peraza situation where this is a former top prospect and all the attention went to Anthony Volpe, rightfully so, I believe. But you took your eyes off of Peraza, and now his development has completely flatlined to the point where we always say, hey, Peraza can probably be a trade deadline piece. I don't know if he holds any value at this point. I know some teams probably still do think highly of him, and he showed it in the past. It just feels, though, that even if you look at the minor leagues, it's a bunch of either former veterans that, don't really have stay in the major leagues anymore and will be called up if there's, an injury for a little while, or it's, prospects that development has completely flatlined. And it is a good question to raise. And I think we go into it more next week. We've already kind of gone on for 50 minutes and haven't gotten even to the fun point yet. But I mean, we've said it forever. We've said, where's the development? And even outside of development in the major leagues, those guys are fully developed, right? Alex Verdugo fully developed at this point. Those guys, Trevino, Wells, on the other hand, not yet, but I know we've mentioned him today. You look at Gleyber Torres has been up in the majors for a while. It's another question of where is the help in the major leagues? Because these guys are struggling. They're struggling for a reason. There's whether it be their approach at the plate, whether it be that, they need to fix their stance or their, whatever the case is, there's definitely adjustments to be made that can get these guys back to where they were. And like maybe DJ LeMahieu's not the best option to use here, but we know what DJ used to be, and injuries have caught up to him, right? So maybe he's not the guy to use. But Verdugo and Torres are two guys that highly thought of for a while, whether it be in the minors or Major League Baseball. And now they've completely died out at the plate too. And it goes, where's the hitting and, instruction? You've got the development failure in the minor leagues and you've got instruction failure in the major leagues. And I think Judge's personal hitting coach calling out the Yankees, not what you want, but it's true. And you can't fight the truth is probably my last point here.
I think next week we'll get into the organizational stuff. I think we've hit on what's been good, what's been bad, most of what's been bad for the Yankees, but I think I'll think we'll both call ourselves a little Nostradamus for the time that it's finally being called out that they can't develop their own homegrown guys. So we'll get into that more next week. Let's get into the organizational stuff next week when we can take a full 1,000-point view or 1,000-feet view and
we'll
really
do
look
our
at
own
how things
audit.
have gone. I think that's a perfect way to do it. I think we finally do the audit because I think it was our running gag for the entire. Nobody talks about it as much as Bomber Boys does for the first half of the season, and I mean all of the offseason, the audit of, hey, maybe we start using the short porch. Clearly, that was the only thing that came out of the audit. But hey, let's talk about guys who can use short porches. They can use long porches. They can use whatever you want them to use because they're the best home run hitters in baseball. I say that facetiously because one of the guys in the home run derby has a 11 home run total on the season. He's actually better at hitting doubles than he is long balls. Here is this year's home run derby field, 8 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN. On Monday night from Globe Life Field, you can catch the All-Star Game festivities. Gunnar Henderson from the Orioles, probably the best hitter actually that they brought into this home run derby. He's got 27 long balls on the season. He's likely one of the two favorites going into the Derby itself. Henderson in the Derby. Pete Alonso, a home run Derby ringer, is back in the Derby. It's his fifth appearance. He's got 18 long balls on the season. He will be joining Gunnar Henderson as the two real home run hitters of the bunch in the Derby. Marcell Ozuna is in the Derby. He's in his Derby for the first time. He's got 24 long balls on the season. Jose Ramirez returns to the Derby. He has 23 home runs on the season coming by way of the Guardians. Adolis Garcia is in the Derby, 17 home runs for him. Teoscar Hernandez from the Dodgers has 19. Bobby Witt has 15, and Alec Bohm rounds out the field with 11 home runs. It is not by any stretch of Derby that's going to light the world on fire. I'm still going to watch it. I'm assuming if you don't have a game, you're still going to watch it. But I know you've got some stuff on the new rules this year, but the home run derby continues to start to fall off a steep cliff in a very slow, matriculated manner year after year, because this is another field that doesn't exactly move the needle.
Just checked. I do have an off day on Monday, so I will 100% be tuned in, which is good.
Maybe we should live stream for the home run derby.
Are you off?
Could be I am off.
All right, we'll talk about this off the podcast, but stay tuned potentially. To me, the one thing about the home run derby is it's still going to excite every year because I mean, all those guys, even Alec Bohm, can hit home runs in batting practice, and that's what this is. And it's still going to be exciting. They changed the rules. I'm trying to pull them up here, but I accidentally closed out the tab. They changed the rules, so it's a little bit more fun, a little bit more into it, and it just feels like, though, with the participants is where you know, kind of take that downfall. The home run derby, regardless, is going to be fun. People are going to tune in. It's going to be awesome. There's going to be some, you know, stupid amount of home runs hit, along with probably a back and forth in the finals, exactly what you want to see. But the participants, to me, it feels to an extent like the NBA dunk contest, where Obi Toppin has been the top guy in these contests for the last 2 years. And sure, former Nick, I'm a Knicks fan. Obi Toppin, he's a fun guy to watch out there, but he's not the LeBron James. He's not, you know, I was about to say Steph Curry, but he wouldn't be in a dunk contest anyway. He's not one of those guys that, you know, can have highlight dunks time and time again. And he's not one of those, you know, big name superstars. And the dunk contest, I mean, matter of fact, you just run out of creative dunks when everyone's been doing them for the last, you know, who knows how many years at this point. Home run derby is simple. You just got to hit home runs. And how high, how far, and how many you hit changes every year, right? And I think that's what keeps getting people back, especially lately with how many more home runs we're seeing approach, you know, 500 feet or 450 plus, all that type of stuff. That's exciting. And I think that is fine in itself. And I think it'll be another fun derby. It just feels like Major League Baseball has a marketing problem when it comes to their players. And I've said this in the past, and I don't want to get too far into it again today, but you can go to the London series this past year when it was the Mets and Phillies, and there was, I forgot who it was, but it was a guy that's no longer with the team being plastered on the Mets signs. And it was just like, do you guys even know your own sport? Do you guys know who the superstars are and who the marketable players are? And I mean, quick point off track, but I just thought of it. July 4th is the MLB's holiday, and you can't even get good viewership on July 4th. I mean, that's a different story again. We'll talk about this at probably some off-season point. I'm just saying July 4th, it should be marketed a little bit better because it's the only sport going on other than the hot dog eating contest. And they left Joey Chestnut off this year, so nobody was going to watch the hot dog eating contest anyway. All right, back to the baseball part of it. It just feels like those guys that are in the derby, to me, they don't excite as much as they should. And Pete Alonso, as much as he's one of those, you know, he's a crosstown rival to an extent, he's awesome to watch in the home run derby every year. He's always fun. He's always up there with the distance and how many he hits. Gunnar Henderson's one of the most exciting prospects in all of sports right now. He is going to be a fun watch. Bobby Witt, love the young gun there as well. Even Jose Ramirez, we've seen him in the past do well. Adolis Garcia feels like he's got to be in because he's, you know, you need a Texas Ranger involved. It's down in Texas. It's down at Globe Life. Alec Boehm, Marcelo Zuna, and Teoscar Hernandez, to me, are, you know, three guys that you're like, why? Are you putting Boehm in because of Philly? You know, because they've made it the last 2 years and have been one of the most exciting fan bases, and you think that's good. The Ozuna situation, I just don't want to get too much into. He's had a really good bounce back year this year, is the easiest way to put it. He's been able to hit well, but even still, it's like, is he a marketable superstar for Major League Baseball? The answer is no, and I'm going to leave that there. And Teoscar Hernandez, sure, he's from one of the most famous organizations, probably, you know, one of the most storied in the Los Angeles Dodgers, but I could name I would name probably 12, 15 Dodgers before I say Teoscar Hernandez's name. Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani. I mean, I'm going to stop there. That's only three. I could keep going, but it just feels like, I don't know what it is. I know a lot of players, including Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, have opted out because you've seen in the past guys go to the home run derby and then slow down afterwards. And the big one there was Aaron Judge in his a couple of years ago down in Miami when him and Stanton had one of the best performances of all time that we've seen in a derby back and forth. But I mean, Pete Alonso has appeared multiple years in a row. He doesn't really slow down afterwards. Jose Ramirez didn't slow down after his last appearance. So to me, it's just a little bit of a, hey, you guys are going to the All-Star game anyway. Might as well have another day. And maybe this year for the Yankees, it's different because of how bad it's been this year. You need to rest, you need to recover, just play the All-Star game and that's it. But I'm talking around the league. I'm talking the big superstar names that we're not seeing appear. It's a little disappointing. I still think this field is going to make it a fun watch on Monday night. It's just disappointing not to see the names that you correlate with Major League Baseball on arguably Major League Baseball's biggest stage right now. Because to me, the Home Run Derby is more fun to watch than just a regular 9 inning All-Star game.
I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. You and I have talked about the marketing problems baseball has faced for quite some time. I would even say I think I'm in the minority of people who watched more NBA playoffs this year than in past years. I don't typically watch a lot. I think honestly, just because the Knicks were in it, it was on more in New York, and I was in New York for the start of the playoffs, and then after that, I host a radio show on Saturday mornings, and there's not a whole lot to talk about right now. So I delved big into the NBA playoffs. But one thing I'll say about the NBA is although they fail to market the finals and fail to market the playoffs to make it really feel special, they do market the heck out of their stars. They make their stars feel like the biggest thing. Their stars at some point became bigger than the teams itself. You know more about LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard. I
Bronny
mean, and look
James.
at the young stars now. Bronny James, Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Brunson. These guys are bigger stars now because of the game itself. More than I guarantee you that if I rattled off Tyrese Halliburton to most people, they couldn't tell you what team he's on, but they know they saw him on NBA marketing. They know he was the guy who torched the Knicks. Probably couldn't tell you that he was on the Indiana Pacers and he's the face of their team. Most
I'm
casual
glad I'm
fans,
glad
but
you
you
just
know who
reminded
he
me he
is.
was on the Pacers because I was still thinking he was on Sacramento, even though he just torched the Knicks this year.
But there
I
you
was
go.
gonna
That's the
interrupt
thing
with
where the
Sacramento.
well, I'm glad you would have proven my point, so thank you. But that's where the MLB has just failed, and it is mightily because the brands are bigger than the players, and I don't think that needs to change. I think there's no way the Yankees and Dodgers are ever going to be bigger than the players itself, or than the players themselves. But there's got to be a way to build these stars up more because your face of baseball is still Mike Trout, a guy who has not been in the playoffs in some time and not been in the conversation for an MVP in the past 2 years, has not been in a World Series ever. And then if you go to Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge, well, they also haven't been in a World Series for quite some time. And I'm not saying that your face of the game has to be in your finals or in the Super Bowl or whatever. The NFL has just gotten lucky that theirs has been for the past few years and has won quite a few in Patrick Mahomes. But even in the NBA Finals, they've built more stars this year. Luka Doncic is more of a household name than he ever was before. Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, Derek White, etc. But on the opposite side of things, when's the last time we've seen any real big marketing push for anybody not named Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, and Mike Trout? Maybe Juan Soto. I mean, maybe Paul Skeens right now,
I think
but
Skeens would probably be the closest thing to be marketing. And honestly, Skeens did most of that himself with
he
his
built his own
performance at
brand with
LSU.
LSU. Yeah. And obviously, it helps that he's also dating one of the biggest influencers in the world in Livy Dunn. But whatever it needs to be, the MLB needs to find solutions. Whether they start getting all these players to start dating famous influencers, maybe that's what you need to do. Listen, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. I don't know. I think Shohei's married now, but
He
maybe
is.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of who you could
So
get.
is Judge.
Gunnar Henderson, and I don't know. Is Charlie D'Amelio still big? That shows how big we're
Well,
big
I've never been
TikTok
in
guys.
tune. I've never been in tune with, you know, influencers, so I have no clue.
I'll start the Gunnar Henderson and Charlie D'Amelio train. I don't even know if she's I don't know if she's even relevant anymore. Somewhere some TikTok fan is cringing listening to you and I talk about this, but you got to find ways to market the game better. You got to find ways to market the Derby better because other than watching Pete Alonso's antics, there's not a lot that's going to draw you in right off the surface other than it's the home run Derby. But I'm sure you and I'll still watch. We might even do a live stream for it. Any final thoughts? I know we could get into streaming service talk and the fact the Yankees are going to play on Roku, but you don't seem to want to talk about that, and I
Not today.
definitely
Not
don't.
today. Um, I have one final point. Last week I said go give a blank check to Juan Soto. This week my challenge for the New York Yankees is by the end of the All-Star break next week, there needs to be at least one change. Whether it be a trade, whether it be something with the coaching staff, which I don't think they're going to touch, something's got to change. I think you got to do something in your next, you've got 3 games this week and then you've got the 4 days off. So those next 7 days, plenty of time to start rolling with some change. Talked about that snowball effect. You need to stop the negative snowball as soon as possible to make sure. Look, we're not saying the Yankees aren't going to make the playoffs, but if this continues for another month, we're sitting here in a month. Well, I guess we're sitting back at school, kind of close to back at
Close
school.
to.
Close
Depends
to
how
back
early
at
you and
school.
I go back.
We'll be sitting at PNC Park because that's our plan right now to go back to school, then go to Pittsburgh. But we'll be sitting there and we'll be talking about the New York Yankees likely missing the playoffs if this snowball continues. So stop it as early as possible. Doesn't even have to be a big trade yet. You can go make a minor trade, go add someone somewhere. You need infielders, you need relief pitchers, you probably need a starter at this point. Do something small, do something to get the ball rolling, call someone up. I don't know what, but something's got to change before you and I get back on this podcast, likely in a week. I'm not talking about when we might do the live stream, just, about a week from now when we're back here, regularly scheduled program.
You heard it. I mean, this has been a cluster, what of an episode because we're sad. The Yankees are struggling. The Mainers are struggling. The Tom Stocks are kind of struggling. Everybody's struggling right now. Justin Chavalella and I will probably not do a morning episode again for quite some time because we're struggling. I need another cup of coffee. But with that said, Justin, I thank you. It's always a pleasure hanging with you and talking Yankees, even
Absolutely.
when they are losing 18 games in a 26 game span. For Justin Chevrolet, I'm Dylan Price signing off and saying, enjoy this final stretch into the All-Star break. Hopefully, the Yankees can take a series against the O's to really get some momentum heading into the break. I'd say it's a must-win series to say the very least. You rattle off at least 2 wins, maybe sweep them. Get the brooms out in Camden Yards, whatever it takes, wherever you may be. Thanks for hanging with us. Enjoy watching that game on Roku on Sunday, Justin. And for Justin Chevrolet, I'm Dylan Price saying thanks for hanging with us for a crazy episode and have a great weekend.